Nothing about township government is intuitive. It's all driven by law. I never saw myself to be where I have been for the past 30 years. I was filling a part-time position, and around that time I was approached by the clerk at the time, Joan McCrary, to see if I was interested in a part-time position working for Independence Township. I took that position, which was part-time for some time, working in elections. I was then as an elections coordinator. Learned it all from the ground up and began the task of also helping to administer school elections as well as state and the federal elections that are required by law for clerks to administer.
Our office is commonly referred to as the keeper of the records. The clerk is responsible for maintaining custody of legal documents such as deeds, bids, contracts, agreements, easements, and the oath book. The clerk's office processes paperwork for various business licenses and permits required by township ordinances. Some of the licenses and permits that the township regulates and issues are massage establishments, pawnbrokers, precious metal and gem dealers, solid waste haulers, solicitors, special events, and nonprofit floating retail sales organizations. Each of these require coordinated efforts of multiple departments within the township for the applicant to gain approval. Our office handles many of the township's publications within local newspapers. Examples of these are meeting synopsises of actions taken by the Board of Trustees, public hearings held by the Board of Trustees, notices required to administer elections, first and second reading notices for new and amended ordinances as required by law. The staff in the clerk's office work hand in hand together. It is not an office where one person does everything.
We have accounts payable, we have payroll, which is under the finance director, and I have a deputy clerk and then also an administrative aide that assists primarily with elections during election season. Elections are way more than just that day.
We currently have just over 30,000 registered voters. I believe it's around 30,125 voters. It really starts about 4 months prior to an election, and a lot of it starts with reaching out to election inspectors and trying to determine their availability for each of the elections. It also involves contacting the polling locations and making sure that the sites are available. And prior to the election, our ballots are printed and delivered in advance of the election. And once we receive them, we go through the process of testing those ballots to make sure the equipment is recording the information accurately. So test decks are developed, and basically every scenario is tested through each of the computers. Things like overvotes, undervotes, cross parties, blank ballots, stray marks, etc. That's all tested in advance. The Election Commission runs that, and it's open to the public for them to see that the equipment is properly tested. And then we hold training sessions for each of our people.
State law requires that an election worker is trained once every 2 years. We assign and train upwards of 130 election workers per election every year. Those election workers are approved by the Township Election Commission, of which I am the chair of that commission, and we have 2 trustees. We spend a full, sometimes week and a half in training many hours every election, those workers, so that they're prepared and equipped for what may come across them on election day. We actually train them most often even within those 2 years to keep them abreast of any changes that may occur throughout the year. In November of 2022, Proposal 2 was passed, which changed our election offerings to our residents. The impact to that brought on early voting. We were able to make that available this last election for the first time in Independence Township. We were proud to open the doors of our Brady Lodge at our Bay Court Park to the residents of Independence Township as well as the city of the Village of Clarkston. Also a new law change, 2022, voters can now take their absentee ballot that was issued to them to an early voting site and actually cast that ballot that they were assigned, or they can bring it on election day and cast that ballot into the tabulator on election day. We now offer what I call the trifecta of voting. Voters can vote either by absentee, or the 45 days prior to an election. They can vote during the early voting period, or on election day at their precinct. I've seen a lot of changes over the last 30 years, and passion for me in being a clerk is serving others. At the end of the day, knowing that we did everything that we could for our residents.
We are the first line of communication for our residents, and they trust us to help them with addressing their needs.
Transparency has become more and more important. We do everything according to the law, and we're confident that everyone's vote is captured and captured accurately.